Welcome back. This is Newsfeed PM. I'm Masachaba Kumalo. Trade union Fedusa says it has written to the Western Cape Provincial Police Commissioner about gender-based violence-related cases being dismissed in the courts across the province. The union says a comprehensive reform in how GBV is handled is needed to ensure that survivors obtain the justice and support that they rightfully deserve. General Secretary Riefdah Ajam joins us for more. Riefdah, welcome to Newzroom Afrika. Thank you so much for your time. Have there been any responses to your appeal?
Mr. Chaba, good afternoon to you and good afternoon to your viewers. Let me be explicit, direct, and to the point. We have written, there has been an acknowledgement, but in the numerous follow-ups that have been done, it only points to the testimony that there is a sluggish response to the urgency of dealing with this crisis that we have on hand. So whilst the Commissioner's office has acknowledged we have yet to receive a concrete date in order to deal with the bilateral and the conversation that we need to have in order to address these horrific matters that are currently happening.
All right, could you please paint a picture for us in your own words of the current, essentially what seems to be a crisis within SAPS at the moment, where especially gender-based violence cases are concerned?
Absolutely. So, Masih Shaba, the media reports revealed this week that ironically has been highlighted by the MEC for Safety and Security in the Western Cape, where we have something like 243 cases that have been struck off the court roll. Out of those 243 cases, 36.6% of those cases, which is essentially, if we crunch the numbers, it is about 87 cases that have been struck off the roll, specifically dealing with gender-based violence. This is an absolute travesty to justice for those who have had the courage to come forward, and it's an absolute smack in their faces where they are seeking justice, where they are seeking retribution, and it's once again a direct implication of the systemic failures that we are seeing in our justice system and in the ability to advance on justice for those victims and ultimately to ensure that justice is served. But in this case, justice denied may well be justice, justice delayed may well be justice denied.
Riefdah, these are really alarming stats that you are mentioning here to me. Do we have any idea what could be behind so many cases being struck off the roll?
Well, number one, Masih Chaba, we are looking at inefficiencies in the system. It is terribly disheartening that this crisis has been penned and coined as a crisis by our very own president, where he had alluded to the fact that the next great pandemic after COVID-19 was the pandemic of gender-based violence. So those systemic failures that we are seeing here and the absolute denial by many of the officials within the policing system when these cases are brought to the fore. Are you sure? Is it really this that had happened? It's an insult. At the same time, we are looking at lack of training, but essentially so when it comes to the handling of cases, when it comes to the handling of evidence, how so does it then deny those victims of society justice and retribution, but at the same time deliberately painting a picture that there is impunity, that consequence management is something that is being put on the back burner. So we must certainly have to deal with a number of issues within the system in order to ensure that we can advance on many of these issues.
Well, I just want to know from you, Riefdah, over the last few years, the government has communicated, in particular SAPS, that there has been training all round to policemen and policewomen to know how to deal with GBV cases sensitively. So in light of the fact that the training is supposedly there, do you think that there may be something else going on over and above the issue of training?
Well, training is absolutely essential, not just in the system, but we need to have the sensitivity be clouding that training to ensure that both male and female officers, whoever is on duty and when those cases are being reported, are able to treat those victims with the sensitivity that they deserve, considering that they have been subjected to abuse and violation. So we need to have this as an ongoing process. Whether it is the police, whether it's the judiciary. But we cannot say that the results are yielding positive outcomes at this point in time. So much more concerted efforts must be made to deal with this, with the issue of training. When it comes to the first point of call, in many instances, the National Prosecuting Authority likewise have been launching the Tutuzela centers that provides a safe space for victims of gender-based violence and other crimes. But at the same time, what are the results? What is the take-up? How effective is the system in terms of managing and maintaining these types of records to make sure that we can deal decisively with this crises that we have on hand, failing which it just becomes lip service once again by government and all the officials that have been tasked with dealing with this very sensitive matter.
Amidst all these alarming statistics that you've presented forward in terms of the number of cases that fall to the wayside, to what extent does corruption within the South African Police Service play a role in eradicating some of these cases?
Masechaba, it's alarming. We have to say that there's a lack of capacity to deal with matters. So when dockets disappear, and in this instance, when dockets get struck off the roll, it just points to inefficiencies in the system. And most certainly, you can tie corruption into the entire process. But at the same time, because of societal norms, because of stigmas that are attached to this, we are finding that consistently there is not concerted effort to deal with the matter. And in this way, we are only just perpetuating a cycle of violence. It's absolutely important. We cannot underscore that corruption is involved in these matters, whether in the smallest of incidents in terms of handling a case or how the case is managed to get an effective outcome. So most certainly from the smallest levels at the bottom, whether it's societal prejudices, but at the same time corruption within the system, it is intolerable, it is unbearable, and unless decisive action is taken, what is happening in the Western Cape is most certainly going to find itself manifesting in all other provinces, which ultimately means that the National Development Plan, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights is not in any way working for the citizens of South Africa and only just smacking them in the face and kicking them down the road even more than what they are right now.
And what effective solutions can be adopted by the Western Cape to essentially come up with strategies and a plan in order to alleviate these horrific crimes?
Well, Masechaba, let me underscore the fact that even though a number of violent crimes have come out by way of the statistics by Minister Becky Cele, we have to also acknowledge the fact that the MEC has been courageous enough to highlight these things. So it is a matter of collectively taking hands by virtue of the Western Cape and all the other provinces collectively under the jurisdiction of the national minister to make sure that these crimes can be eradicated and dealt with in a way that brings justice. So some of the solutions that Fedusa puts on the table, and we are hoping that this conversation can be fast forwarded in a way that it brings some sort of solution. The first one that we look at is a review and a revision of the procedures in particular in terms of how GBV cases are being handled with a focus on improving the evidence collection as well as the court procedures. We are also looking at training. You mentioned it earlier on, but training doesn't just stop in terms of whether it's the police or whether it is the judiciary. training must be expanded to the communities where the victims are coming from to make sure that there is consistent awareness about the police, the judiciary, and the sensitivity about handling these matters, because the stigmas arise from the communities where these victims are coming from. And linked to that community involvement is the awareness that we must raise consistently in terms of the protection of these most vulnerable groupings within society. And most importantly, the solution we put on the table is about consistent and vigorous monitoring and evaluation. If we are not going to highlight these cases that have been struck off the roll, how are we going to be the eyes and the ears of society where our members are based in, to make sure that justice can be brought to the fore? So the outcomes and the effectiveness of these measures must consistently be subjected to the spotlight to make sure that it can be successful in small stages, but ultimately successful.
Thank you so much for your time. And to the Western Cape Provincial Police Commissioner, the people have spoken. That was Fedusa General Secretary Riefdah Ajam.